Hey guys, and welcome to Construct 101. Today we are looking at the last of the general behaviors, and that is wrap. Okay, so wrap is a really simple behavior and it does a really simple thing. It basically means that when your sprite that you're controlling, your player or whatever, gets outside of your layout on one side, let's say it steps outside on the right, it will wrap back to the left or up and down. Okay, so it's the same thing. So I'll show you guys what I mean by that. Now, just before we start, our screen is set to 640, so 640 wide, 960 tall. Now I like this resolution if you're working with portrait games because I find it to be the best size between the super wide screens now and then something like the iPad. Now, if it was just focusing on mobiles, most mobiles have super wide screens, like 16 by 9, some of them like 18 by 9. But when it comes to tablets, they're more of a square format, so you have to think of both if you're making universal game app and you want it to fit across all devices. So it makes things quite tricky sometimes, but there are ways of getting around it. Now, it does make it easier if you pick one single orientation. So if you like if you select portrait or landscape, it makes it easier because then you can work with a little bit more space. Now, if you are trying to support both orientations, that makes things quite tricky and you have to work with more of a square resolution, okay, and adapt some layout elements to suit both orientations. So it can be quite hard to get around, and it is easier to focus on one at a time. Now, the reason I talked about it just now is that I'm going to explain something a little bit later when it comes to the wrap behavior. Now, first we're going to give it a go. So behaviors, add new behavior, and go down to wrap. And just for the sake of demonstration purposes, we're just going to add the 8 direction movement, and I'm just going to change it to 4 directions, and we're going to not have the angle set. Okay, don't worry about that, we'll get into those behaviors later, but that's just so I can show you guys. So let's play this, and I'm going to show you guys what I mean. So as you see, that colored area in the middle, that faintly colored area in the middle is our layout size, okay? If we stretch out, as you see, it will show more of the window and what's outside. That's because of our scaling mode, which is scale outer, and it will show more of what's out here. Now, you can also use other modes, but then you are more limited, and it's more let's have a look at it really quickly. We've got something like letterbox scale and so on, and which means it's going to cut off those areas, so it's going to hide what's outside of your layout. However, it also means that you're going to be left with empty space in if you're on a device, and let's say your device is super tall. So let's do this demonstration. Let's say you've got let's play again. Let's say you've got your layout set to this size here, more or less, and your device is this tall. It means that all this area is either going to be black or white or whatever other color, while your sprite is going to be hidden when you get into those areas. It means there's nothing is going to be displayed here, and I don't find it to be a good idea. I prefer having something, if you fill it with a background pattern or anything, just something else to show, because otherwise it sort of looks like, it's not always the case, but it can come across a little cheap when you've set your game to a letterbox aspect. And yeah, that's just my thought anyway on it, and it kind of makes the game look like it's being designed for a single device and ported hastily. I don't yeah, it's very difficult, and I understand why developers do it, but yeah, it's developing for mobiles has got a lot of issues and things to think about, so let's not get into all of it now. Anyway, arrow keys, okay. I will quickly demonstrate wrap. Now, wrap can work this way. Okay, so when the whole sprite exits the stage, the layout, it will wrap to the other side. So that's a really nice way of quickly making it that your sprite, moves Pac-Man style, maze. If you've got something like that and you want to exit one side, come back the other, that's a really quick example. Same thing will happen here, see? But here is the issue that I've talked about immediately. Now, if I select something like this size, okay, this layout size, there is no way I can guarantee that my game is always going to be displayed at that size. There's just no way. Now, you might think, okay, so like, let's say I'm making it a portrait game and I only need the character to move side to side and exit the stage that way. That's cool. Most of the time, if you're playing on phones, you're going to be playing with something like this, okay, wide phone, slightly narrower phone, whatever. Now, here is the problem. When you get to an iPad, you're going to start stretching this way, and it's going to be more of a 4:3 aspect ratio, and this is where we start running into issues, because when your character now exits, you are just going to now see a flip, okay, and doesn't fully exit the screen, as you see. So I find this quite problematic, because the only way this behavior is useful is if you either use letterbox aspect ratio, or there is another way to do things, and this is what I talked about at the start, which is setting to this to a square aspect. Okay, now as you see, we've set the project layout size to 640 by 640, but our layout height is still 960, which means that there is a little bit more left. So let's just change it, because we don't need that. Okay, let's just do this. Now we're also going to change the background to the same size, put this in the middle. Now let's have a look at this. So let's say now you are playing with this, okay? When we're on a phone, you can display extra background and all that sort of stuff around here. Now, when you're on an iPad, you can go all the way to the square ratio, and your character is always going to exit out the side. Now, one of the issues with this is that you are only left with this area as a safe zone. So any gameplay elements or anything that needs to be interacted with, let's say if you're doing something to do with touches, would have to lie in inside this area. If it's a game where you're controlling the character with keys and maybe the camera follows, things like that, then it's not really an issue. But like I said, when you've got elements that need to be interacted with, you cannot rely on any of this stuff ever being visible. See, so this all here is dead zones. They're just to make things prettier. Now, same thing will happen if you go wide. However, you can lock the game to portrait only, and like I said, play with this square ratio, just so you're always left with a nice wrap. So it means that you can exit the screen and the character will never just flip to the other side before actually fully exiting the screen. Hopefully you guys understand what I mean here. This is also a really good way to make universal apps, okay? So if you are trying to make something that will adapt to both sizes, this is a really good way. You just make sure that you display more backgrounds up here, more backgrounds down here and on the sides, and then whatever size the screen will be on the device, whatever orientation, the game will always adapt, okay? However, if you are trying to use the wrap behavior, you will need to decide whether you are going to use portrait or landscape. So unless there is one more thing you can do, which is you can create an artificial frame. So let's say you've got a game which is going to be displayed like this. you could put a frame around here, okay? Put some virtual controls down here on a black background, which is sort of like an overlay. Same thing at the top here, you could put some information, okay? And that is basically an overlay that covers these parts here, which means that if the character now exits, and I'm just going to give you a quick example, okay? I'm just going to copy these here, and I'm just going to duplicate this, clone object, yeah, and we're going to turn this black. Just going to give you a quick example of what I mean, okay? And we're going to put one up here, one down here, one on the side, and here too, okay? So now you can exit top and bottom, and you can exit sides, no matter how you stretch the screen, okay? And it'll work also. So you're covering up the area. Now it is not the same as using what's it called again? I'll just quickly check. Letterbox scale. It's not the same as using letterbox scale, because in that instance, if you're using letterbox scale, that black space is absolutely useless. It will never display anything else. However, in this case, like I described before, what you could do, for example, is put virtual controls down here, put some information, maybe a pause button, and when the screen becomes wider than it is tall, like this, then you could flip them to the sides, okay? Ask the program to show them on the sides instead. So there are many ways to adjust to this, and this would be the only way that I have figured out to be able to use the wrap behavior in both directions, okay? Using an artificial frame covering up the rest of the layout, okay? So hopefully this helped, guys. Hopefully it gives you some ideas on how you can make this work. Maybe you've struggled with this before. I have, and I've been thinking of different ways to adapt my games to mobile devices, how to use the wrap behavior, how to make things work properly. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions about this, and I'll try and answer them the best I can, and I will see you in the next episode of Construct 101. Later.